Hello. Today we are going to be reacting to 21 things in the US that puzzle most foreigners. This is a video by Brightside, and as usual, the link to this video will be down in the description if you want to go check it out yourself. But yeah, so just to give some context, I've never been to the US. I've not really done much traveling outside of the UK until very recently. Very recently, you know, the first time I left the UK was to Dublin. It's questionable about whether that's, that's not really a true abroad experience because whilst it is in the Republic of Ireland, it is very much still quite similar to the UK. And then shortly after that, I went to Germany, which was an amazing experience. So I hope one day to visit the US, and let's just see. I'm curious to see if I will be puzzled by this or if not. So 21 things, it's 10 minutes. I'm going to be pausing throughout it, obviously, to comment on whether or not I'm puzzled. So let's just jump right into it. So let's keep the volume there. If we need to turn it up, we can. But here we go. Let's turn it down a little bit.
You may have lived in the United States your whole life without realizing that something totally normal for you seems bizarre to people from other parts of the world. Who knew that munching on fried pickles in a highly air-conditioned room was so outlandish? Well, here are some other...
I love pickles. Fried pickle? I can't. Is that like a deep fried pickle? That sounds nice, to be honest. I'd have that.
Highly entertaining Americanisms I've gathered. Let's count it down from number 21. Sales tax is a guessing game. When you go shopping in the U.S. and see a price tag that says $14.88, don't expect to pay $14.88 at the register. Sales tax is not included in the price of an item, and since this tax can vary from state to state, figuring out your total can turn into the ultimate mental math challenge. In many European countries, the sales tax is already included in the price. It's known as a value-added tax, or VAT. Number 20.
Yeah, that's something that I was aware of, but it does bother me that when you go to the store, the price you're looking at for an item does not necessarily reflect the price that you're going to be paying. Like, to me, that's so unusual. I'll go to the store and I'll see the exact price that I'm going to be paying for the item on the shelf. So then it makes it easier because then you can just pick up the item, throw it in the basket, and then keep a track in your head of like, okay, that's £2, let's say. And then if you've got like a bit of a budget that you're sort of going off, then you know for sure if you're under that budget or not. So the fact that that's not the case, that would freak me out. I'd be so confused if I didn't know about this previously and I went to America and experienced that. Yeah. I think the fact that it's different in every state as well, is that not confusing for you? Obviously, this is kind of what you're used to, I suppose, if you're speaking to Americans directly here, obviously. Obviously, this is kind of just your way of life. It's something that you've grown up and lived with, and I assume you've got used to it, but is it not confusing going from like state to state, especially if you've never visited a state before? How do you know what that tax is going to be? Is that just something that you just have ingrained in your memory, or is it stated anywhere, or do you only find out, like, is it stated on the labels on the shelves maybe, or do you only find out when you come to pay and they say, oh, it's this much, and then you see on the receipt the amount of tax or something? I'm really curious to know that, because I'd really struggle with that, to be honest, especially because it's like not necessarily super easy numbers to just immediately convert in your head all the time. So anyway, yeah, let's continue.
20. We're total workaholics. A lot of Americans don't feel the need to take long vacations, so they often let vacation and sick hours pile up without ever using them. Plus, most employers only give you 2 weeks out of the year. But in a lot of other countries, like Brazil or Finland, workers are encouraged to take an average of 30 days of vacay. Wow, maybe I should take some time off, or perhaps I'll just keep waiting. 19.
This one is kind of surprising to me. I was sort of vaguely aware of this, that vacation is less available in the US than it is elsewhere. Like, I think here the minimum vacation you get given for a job, at least full time, that I can think of is like 25 days. And then you'll also have, I think it's 25 days, 20 or 25 days. And then on top of that, you'll have the public holidays like bank holidays, which are just like very common kind of public holidays. Like we've got two in April, for example, that almost everyone takes off. Not everybody does, but it's generally a public day of rest. And yeah, it's very much sort of encouraged to take those days off, and they're usually paid. Like it's paid time off rather than unpaid time off. For some reason, I seem to think that is American sort of vacation, is that paid time off or is that just unpaid time off? From you, I don't know why I'm even asking that. 'Cause it's a totally random question that's coming in my head that I'm not sure I can even think of where I've heard that before. But yeah, that's interesting. Not very surprising or puzzling because it's something I have heard before though. So it's I'm already aware of that particular one. Let's go on.
Team. It's not a party without red Solo cups. In the States, this red plastic cup is synonymous with "party on, dude." But other countries apparently don't recognize this cup to mean the same thing. People in the UK, for example, don't use red Solo cups at get-togethers. They have to go to a special website to purchase the cups for American-themed parties. Who knew?
This is actually very true. The red Solo cups are considered to be a very American thing. Like when I think of a red Solo cup, I think of like the classic sort of student party, you know, the doing beer pong and things like that. And yeah, as it said there, you don't really get red Solo cups here. You can do, especially if people are doing. I don't know why I keep scratching my nose. It's very itchy, so please excuse me. That you can do, and it's usually only when they're doing kind of an American theme. But normally, yeah, it'll be like white, just white cups, little white plastic cups or something like that. That we'll have here if you get in the sort of quickly kind of disposable plastic kind of cups. But yeah, that is quite interesting. I suspect a lot of other countries around the world will also agree with me in the fact that it's a very American thing to have.
Number 18. Deep fried everything. Whether it's fried pickles or even fried Oreos, America has it all. Fried fish recipes first appeared in Spanish and Portuguese cookbooks as far back as the 1200s, and the Greeks were frying food in olive oil way back in the 5th century BCE. But as America does with many things, they've adopted a tradition from far-off lands and took it up a notch, or 5. 17.
I don't think that's like too crazy because, I mean, obviously I'm speaking on behalf of like the UK and specifically my experience in the more northern part of the UK. So this may not apply to everyone, but I feel like America gets a much more exaggerated reputation around fried foods because we also have loads of fried foods. So you have, you know, there's the classics of like fried chicken and things like that, but we do have like, you know, there's a very classic Scottish sort of chippy food, which is like a fried Mars bar, which I think in the US it's not the Mars bar you're thinking of. I think it's known as like the Milky Way or something. It's kind of like a chocolate covered in like a nougat with caramel on top. I don't know. Anyway, I don't think that's quite that weird, especially from my perspective. The amount of fried stuff. It might be that there's, you know, it comes in a lot bigger portions, or there's, you know, just a lot more availability to it, but that's not too weird to me. I'm not very puzzled by that. But then again, I may change my tone when I visit the US one day and I actually see it firsthand.
Get everything you need right at the pharmacy. If you're not from the US, it may be puzzling to walk into a pharmacy and see aisles and aisles of over-the-counter meds, toys, makeup, clothes, and even groceries. Unlike in other countries where pharmacies sell medicine and medical supplies exclusively, the ones in the US are like small convenience stores where you can grab magazines, Tylenol, and a frozen pizza in one fell swoop.
Okay, so almost everything there isn't that weird to me. The frozen pizza, that is weird to me. The fact that you get frozen food in a pharmacy, that's totally new to me. Unless it's part of... So in the UK, you often get pharmacies that are part of supermarkets, so there'll be like a pharmacy section. that there's no like door or wall that separates them. It's just you'll go to a corner of the pharmacy where like, past everything, and then it'll be the pharmacy section. Um, but to have like standalone pharmacies, I seem to remember when I was younger, it's not necessarily always medication. You can get sort of like shampoos and I remember when I was younger, I used to go to a pharmacy and like my mum would go off and do whatever she was doing, and I'd go and look at the comic books that were there. I remember like getting the comic books, and there was also that's where I first found I think it was a VHS of the Men in Black. I think it was a VHS or maybe it was a DVD, but the very first Men in Black I got from a pharmacy. And thinking back on it, that's super weird. So, like, I don't think that's a usual thing these days, but certainly pharmacies exclusively selling medication, whilst it is a thing here, it's not as weird to say that they may sell other things as well. Sort of quality of life things, I'd say. Not necessarily groceries, though, unless it's part of a supermarket. Let's continue.
16. Fill her up. In America, if a restaurant doesn't offer free refills on fountain drinks, it's kind of strange. But in other countries, once you buy one beverage, that's it. France banned refills on sugary sodas back in 2017 in order to combat the current obesity epidemic. But in the US, the idea of free refills is still alive and well.
That one's actually quite interesting. I hadn't really thought about this. Free refills here are quite rare, but they're not unheard of. And then I was thinking about it, and the ones where it's unheard of are usually American chains. So I'm thinking like Five Guys, for example, they'll have like the soda machine where you have all these weird and wacky flavors of soda that you can then mix together and make a ungodly concoction of soda. But then thinking about like anywhere else that I've really gone, they don't tend to have that. Sometimes they do, but yeah, I'd say it's not super common, at least from my perspective.
15. If you don't like it, return it. Whether it's an ugly sweater from grandma or a heinous pair of earrings from an ex, if you don't like it, you can just return it. In America, making returns at stores is pretty normal and super easy. I mean, the US even has a National Returns Day in January, conveniently held for you to return holiday gifts you weren't too thrilled about.
So again, this isn't too weird to me because we do have you can return stuff pretty easily here in the UK as well, as long as it isn't something that you've half consumed it or something like that, or if it's makeup that you've already you've clearly been using. I think it's more difficult to return then. The main thing is you'd need to have the receipt with you to prove that you've purchased it from that place, and then they'll confirm it and take it. One thing what was the last part of that? Oh, yeah, the National Day of Returns. We have that as well in the UK. I think a lot of people don't realise that's what this date is, though. The day after Christmas is called Boxing Day, which is a public holiday in the UK. And the reason it's called that is for boxing up presents that you didn't like and you go to return. I don't really know. I don't know if that's like literally what it was sort of there for, or that's the true meaning behind it, but I'm pretty sure that was at some point in history that was like the reason for that day. I don't quite know how easy it would be to return presents though, especially if you haven't already got the receipt with it. So yeah, I'm not sure about that one, but yeah, that's not weird to me. That's especially with the UK. I imagine I'm not going to be too super duper surprised with a lot of this stuff because the UK sometimes shares a lot of similarities with the US in this sort of stuff, it seems.
Conveniently held for you to return holiday gifts you weren't too thrilled about. 14. Tips for everyone. Cab drivers, servers, hairdressers, you gotta tip them. Tips are acceptable for almost any service in the US and sometimes consist of 25% of the bill. We haven't started tipping surgeons yet, but there are places in other parts of the world, such as Japan, that consider tipping incredibly rude, like in restaurants. When you travel to different countries, it's important to learn their tipping etiquette so that you don't offend anyone.
Yeah, so tipping here isn't as common. It's mainly you get like tips in like restaurants, and it's usually it's pretty optional, and it's not usually as high as 25%. I think the standard. I don't really go to restaurants much, but I think the standard is usually like 10 to 15%. Um, but I believe that's largely because a lot of the wages in the US around these kind of services are kind of supplemented with tips, aren't they? Like they don't necessarily get paid an amazing wage often. Usually it's like not great, but then the tips bump that up to something that is kind of acceptable sometimes. I don't know. I don't really know the dynamics of that. But yeah, beyond that, tipping is very uncommon. Um, but still available. You can still tip if you want to, but it's just nowhere near as sort of a standard as it is in the US by the sounds of it.
13. I'll take my coffee to go. With a Starbucks on every corner, it's very normal to see people toting around a coffee as they shop, commute to work, and whatever else at all times of the day. But in many parts of the world, coffee is meant to be sipped on while seated and enjoying the paper or chatting with friends. Tugging your coffee along with you throughout the day might be due to the fact that the cups are huge and take longer to drink. Who's got that kind of time to be sitting in a cafe for hours? Sounds like fun to me.
I'm not really a coffee person, so I can't really comment on this one that much. I don't know what the usual etiquette is here. We obviously have Starbucks as well, so it's not super uncommon to see people walking around with a cup of coffee in their hands, or sitting down for a cup of coffee with the friends.
Number 12. The land of ice cold drinks. Now, speaking of drinks, if it's not a hot coffee or cocoa, then it's probably got ice in it. Tea, coffee, lemonade, soda, water. Americans like it on the rocks. If you go elsewhere in the world, odds are you'll be sipping your soda at room temperature, or maybe slightly refrigerated if you don't specifically ask for ice.
So normally in the UK, often ice will come as a standard, but they'll ask you. So if you're out somewhere and you get in a cola, they'll ask if you want ice with it. Most people will say yes. The actual drink itself is usually chilled anyway. However, for me personally, cold drinks are my preference by far. I find them to be a lot more sort of quenching of my thirst, I suppose you could say. Whereas hot drinks, I see as more of like a treat, not necessarily to have when I'm thirsty, but to have when I just want to have, I don't know, like a hot chocolate or something, or a tea. Um, but yeah, I think for me personally, often I end up opting not to have ice, and I can't remember why. Obviously, part of it's because you end up getting more drink if you don't have ice, but I can't remember the exact reason why. I think it was like ice can be, I don't know. I don't really know. That's just what I do. But that's not super weird to me.
Number 11. Keeping the AC on at all times. Americans must have an aversion to being hot. In many parts of Europe, people simply don't use air conditioning as much as they do in the States. Here, it's expected to always have the AC blaring, and a lot of visitors find it pretty strange and quite chilly. But come on, it makes sense. If you're cold, you can layer up. If you're hot, all you can do is suffer and complain about it.
This one is actually something I wish was more common in the UK. Beyond the fact, beyond talking about sort of environmental impact of having so many air conditionings. Let's just ignore all that for now. In the UK, it's very unusual and very rare to come across like a standard house. It might be, if it's an apartment in like a high rise or something like that, you'd get it, but or in a hotel. But generally, in people's houses, you won't have an AC unit. You won't have air conditioning. You basically just have to deal with the temperature. If it's too cold, you turn on the heating. If it's too warm, you suffer. You take a cold shower and you put a fan on and just pray, and just melt. Basically, that's the one thing that I wish, especially in the summers, because sometimes a lot of people don't realize this, but sometimes in the UK, especially during summer, it can get really warm, especially for us. And because our houses are so insulated and sort of geared towards staying warm in the winter and during cold weather and during rain and all that sort of stuff. The heat from summer, even if outside isn't super hot, inside gets just so uncomfortable, and because of the humidity and things like that, it can just be grim, to be honest, at times. So you'll get air conditioning in like supermarkets and places like that, but not necessarily in homes unless they're quite fancy, or if it's part of like an apartment building where they just put them in as a standard. So yeah, I do wish it was more of a standard, but sadly it is not.
Number 10.
Oh, and I'm very much more of a cold. I prefer the cold over the warmth. I very much agree with the sort of the statement of, if you're cold, you can put on more clothes. It's usually, it's a lot more cozy in bed when it's cold outside the sheets, because then I find it easier to sleep. But when it's too warm, I suffer. I can't handle it. Sleeping is horrible, like trying to sleep at least, and it's just not a nice time. So yeah, anyway, let's continue.
Looking at dollars is a snooze fest. I remember going to Europe for the first time and thinking their banknotes looked like Monopoly money. And I guess a lot of countries have bills of different colors and sizes depending on the value, like Swedish krona and Russian rubles. But not in the US. It's all greenbacks, baby. Sure, 10s look a little yellowy, 50s are kind of pinkish, and Benjamins seem bluer than the others. But still, US dollars definitely aren't as fun and rainbowy as other currencies.
I actually didn't realize that US currency was even slightly colored beyond green. That's really interesting to find out. Is there a reason for that? Is it intentionally done, or is it, well, I assume obviously it's intentionally done, but I didn't realize there was a difference in the colors of the notes there. Obviously in the UK we have quite vibrant colors, and it's like almost like a plasticky kind of note these days, rather than a sort of a, not paper, but like a papery kind of note that I guess you get in the US. But yeah, I think the dollar. Yeah, ignoring the fact that I'm surprised that the dollar actually has different colors depending on the denomination of it. I don't think that would puzzle a lot of people, because the US dollar is so universally known and seen in movies and TV and all that sort of stuff, that I don't think there's any surprises there beyond the fact there's actually different colors, which I'm surprised by. That's kind of cool.
Number 9. Give
Slightly different colors.
a thumbs up. In America, even little kids know a thumbs up means good job, way to go, or anything positive like that. But if you travel to Greece or the Middle East and give this common American gesture, you probably won't make too many friends. Hey, how about giving this video a thumbs up for the useful tip?
That laugh at the end there. So obviously in the UK, thumbs up is very much the same as the US. Giving a thumbs up feels fine. However, what I found more recently, if you're in a conversation and you end up giving a thumbs up, it's more of awkwardness. It feels awkward to give a thumbs up. It's like, yeah, nice. I don't know if that's just me being socially awkward or what, but often I end up doing it unintentionally, and it just feels awkward to give a thumbs up to people when I'm trying to give positive affirmations. So interestingly, with regards to the thumb though and gestures, one that I did learn in at some point, I can't remember if it's just Germany or it's countries around there, or if it's Austria, they have, rather than sort of fingers crossed to say, like I'm crossing my fingers for you, good luck, they have holding their thumb like that. I'll hold my thumbs for you. I thought that was an interesting sort of gesture that I quite like. For some reason, I think it's kind of a cool gesture. I know in some parts of the world, thumbs up is considered like a negative, isn't it? I wonder if YouTube in those parts of the world, isn't it some parts of the world it's the other way around? So thumbs down is considered a positive and a thumbs up is considered a negative, or something like that. I wonder if YouTube have changed the thumbs up, thumbs down system specifically for those countries, so it's like the other way around. I doubt it, but that would be interesting to find out.
Number 8. The date writing conundrum. So many visitors to the US get really confused by the month, day, year thing. because most parts of the world write the day, then the month, then finally the year. There's no clear historical reason why the US insists on writing the day differently, but we just do.
Not surprising to me because I'm very much aware of this. It would certainly be confusing for me if I'm in America and I'm looking at a date which is like the 1st of April. And to me, that would be 1-4 and then the year. But then to see it as 4-1 and then the year, I'd be like, wait, are they referring to January or are they referring to April here? And I'd have to sort of double check in my head what I'm thinking of there. I'm curious to how Americans feel about this. Like, this is a standard American, because obviously anywhere else where you're interacting internationally, well, international date format is obviously year, month, day, but that's still in the same kind of format of day, month, year, just backwards. How do you feel about that? Do you find it annoying to have your date like this, or do you feel like this is the better way to go? I'm curious. Let's just ignore the fact that, you know, most of the rest of the world do the other way around. I'm curious to what your opinion is on that.
Number 7. Pre-baby baby showers. Many cultures celebrate a new baby coming into the world, but America is one of the few places that does this before the baby actually gets here. In East Asian countries, for instance, celebrations for a new baby are held once the baby is born, as doing otherwise is seen as bad luck. Number 6.
I don't really have much to say on that. I'm not 100% sure on what the standard is here. I'm pretty sure we do the same where it's pre-baby. But that might have been just because it's an American thing and then it's kind of come over and some people do it here and not everyone does, but yeah, I can certainly see why other cultures may see this as like a bad luck thing as well to celebrate before the birth. That's really interesting.
6, where "how are you" means hello. Sure, people ask each other how they're doing in other countries, but Americans often use this phrase as a replacement for hey or hello. It doesn't even require a real response. People just answer with fine thanks, even if they're in a horrible mood or had a terrible day.
I mean, that's the same as the UK. We don't necessarily how are you, we'd say like you're all right or something like that. Normally, especially if it's like the first interaction with someone, you even say it to strangers as you're passing by if you happen to, you know, like just like make eye contact for some reason. Sometimes, not always. It's usually just like a greeting, and similar, you'd say fine, thanks, fine, thanks you, and then a response to that is not necessarily required. It's not considered rude if you don't respond to that often. But yeah, very much the same in the UK.
Number 5. Bathroom stalls that aren't so private. Don't like doing your business in front of complete strangers? Americans don't either, of course, but the fact that bathroom stall doors often reveal as much as your entire lower leg seems to say otherwise. There's no clear reason as to why there's this big gap in public bathroom stalls here, but many guess it's for safety reasons or ventilation. Just saying. Number 4.
I hate that. I didn't know that, and I hate that. Yeah, in the UK, it's very much low to the ground. Sometimes you get the sort of gap in the door that if like someone's walking past and they happen to just for some reason look over to the left or the right and you sort of lock eyes with them and it's that awkward moment. It's like a slight gap. But often it's not. Often it can be much better than that, especially these days. It'll be like a literal. Well, usually in offices at least, it can be like an actual like door that closes and there's like no gap that you can see through at all. I hate the idea of having such a big gap at the bottom. That freaks me out. I wouldn't like that at all.
4. No one uses their inside voice. A lot of my friends who are visiting or moved to the US tell me that locals speak so loud compared to other countries. Whether it's talking on your cell phone or chatting with a friend over lunch, Americans seem to really like projecting their voice. I don't know. Maybe we just want to make sure we're heard.
I mean, people in the UK are generally seen as quite quiet. Often you won't get people just talking to strangers, really, unless it's in a context where it makes a little bit more sense. Maybe you're at a bar or something like that. But yeah, often people just won't speak to each other. The most interaction you'd have with someone is like, if you happen to lock eyes, you'd smile or you'd nod your head, or if you know them, then you'd nod upwards. So that's the sort of the standard. But um, yeah, speaking on your phone and things like that, usually people just won't do that. You do get people that do that on like public transport or something, but often those are the outliers, and often that's kind of seen that's like looked down upon. Like if someone's just talking very loudly on the phone on the bus or the train or something like that next to you, um, you kind of people look down on you because of it. They won't say anything. The UK are very much kind of they just keep themselves to themselves, but um, yeah, that's certainly not common, I should say.
Number 3. It's all about choices. Walk into any grocery store aisle and you'll notice at least 10 different options for cookies, crackers, or cereal. People in the UK don't have these many options for food, and you'll almost never find anything in grape flavor there. Number 2.
That's very true. We do have quite a few choices in the UK, more than it seems to imply here. But then again, I haven't been to the US to really compare the variety of choices. I think choices is a good thing, though. I think having the ability to choose, between different brands, even if it's the same kind of cookie or it's the same flavors or whatever, I think it would be good to have more choice there. So some brands can do things that you wouldn't necessarily agree with morally, or vice versa. You agree with morally, and therefore you can choose to pick that brand over the other brands. Sometimes in the UK, if you wanted something, it might only be a couple of like a single brand or something that is available for that, and you don't really have much options. And I think it is good to have options, especially in flavors. I feel like it'd be nice to have more, like with drinks and things like that, to have more flavorful options. Because in the UK, a lot of drinks are very, you'll have your standard set of stuff, but then it very rarely deviates from that unless it's a company doing like a special edition, limited edition kind of run of weird and wacky flavors. I think there was something else there that I've immediately forgotten. Oh, grape, yeah. So we have grapes in the UK, but we very rarely have grape flavored things. You can find it, but often it's American sort of imports or American style foods that will be like flavored in grape. Our alternative is blackcurrant, which I imagine will be just the same in the US, where it's just as rare. And there is a reason behind that. I remember watching a video at some point where it's like, whilst the UK and the sort of Europe in general, I think it was Europe in general, we had blackcurrants. The US basically banned it at one point and got rid of all blackcurrants because it was quite invasive towards grapes, or I don't know. It's a vaguely similar kind of flavor, but yeah, it will get blackcurrant stuff, but it's usually quite healthy drinks that will be flavored as blackcurrant. You won't necessarily find like sodas and stuff that are blackcurrant flavored unless it's a brand called like Ribena. Um, but yeah, grape as a flavor is very rare in the UK unless it's specifically American.
2. Hopping into the back seat of a cab. When getting into a cab, it's customary in the States to scoot on into the back seat. But in countries like New Zealand and Australia, riding anywhere but shotgun can be a little rude.
This one I'm not entirely sure about. Very much I'm aware in the US, you hop in the back seat of a taxi, the classic kind of New York style yellow taxis that you always see in movies and whatnot. But in the UK, whenever I take a taxi, say it's like an Uber or something, or even a black cab, you're usually always getting in the back. Unless there's enough of you to where one person would need to sit in the front, you're usually always getting in the back. I don't know if that's I don't know if it's considered rude to sit in the front. In my mind, I wouldn't sit in the front seat of a taxi. Say if I've called an Uber, I wouldn't get in the front seat because I'd feel like I'm kind of imposing on the driver's space. So yeah, very much I think similar in the UK where you're more likely to sit in the back. It might also be down to like not being very sociable, so when you sit at the front, you feel like you'd end up needing to speak to the driver a little bit more. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes you have to speak to the driver the whole time, regardless of where you sit. You know, there's the last taxi I took a couple months ago. I remember getting it back from the city, and the driver basically gave me a whole history of. I can't remember. He gave me like a whole history of what was it? It was like algebra or something. This completely random topic. He was giving me a history of algebra, and this was like immediately after because I was coming back from seeing Avatar, the new Avatar movie, and he was like, "Oh, so where you been?" I'm like, "Oh, I've just been to the cinema, saw the new Avatar." And he's like, "Oh, what's that?" I'm like, what's that about? Because he's never seen an Avatar movie. So I had to like awkwardly summarize the plot of the first Avatar and then like where it's come up to for the most recent Avatar movie, and just be like, yeah, the humans are the bad guys here, and there's like these blue aliens, and and this, all this sort of stuff. It was really awkward. So sometimes you can get ones like that, but yeah, I was very much sat in the back of that taxi. Anyway, I'm getting distracted. Let's continue.
Number 1. That classic American smile. In the US, people aren't afraid to be nice and show their pearly whites all the time. And according to a 2015 study at Brown University, because America has always been a very diverse country, it forced people to smile at each other more since they couldn't always communicate with language. That's just one more historical theory as to why Americans tend to smile more than people in other places do. Or maybe we're just, friendlier. Whether you're from the US or not, can you add any more strange Americanisms to the list? Let me know down in the comments. If you learned something new today, then give this video a like, share it with a friend.
Yeah, so the whole smiling thing, we do smile here, but it's usually not. I think my perception of Americans and the Americans that I've met in the UK, for example, they're often a lot more forward and open, and they've used loud. I wouldn't necessarily agree with loud, but a lot more kind of what's the I don't really know what the term is, but yeah, you smile a lot more, I guess. In the UK, smiling isn't uncommon, but it's not like a very teethy smile. It's more of just like a smile, if that makes sense. I think Americans are a lot more sociable, at least from what I've experienced myself. They're a lot more open to just talking with strangers and just having a conversation as if you know that person. Whereas in the UK, that's not usually the case. As we all, like I've said before, we all like to keep ourselves to ourselves, especially when we're in kind of just public and not traveling with anyone. Was there another part? Oh yeah, this was interesting about how the US was so diverse, so therefore this is why it may have come around. I'd say I'm not 100% sure of that because the UK is also very diverse. There's a lot of people from a lot of different cultures, and that's a big part of the sort of the food in the UK. A lot of people, when they think of the UK and they've not really come here, they'll think of the classics like a full English breakfasts or fish and chips. But a large part of the UK kind of food scene has come from people that originated in different countries and have brought that dish with them. And some of the UK's favorite dishes are not necessarily from the UK; they're from another country that has then, and then it's been made sort of that it's been adjusted to fit the UK palate a lot more. But yeah, there's a lot of diversity in the UK, and I think it's a great thing. I think it's so cool to have so many people from different parts of the world and different experiences, because I think it does benefit everyone to have that. Because I feel like if you only had British people, or you only had people that were specifically born in America, like in the United States of America, and have no diversity in culture beyond that, then I imagine it'd be so boring. Like food would be so boring and entertain. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a great thing to have the diversity. So I don't know where I was going with that, but I don't know if that's necessarily the reason behind the smiling, because then I feel like the people in the UK will be smiling a lot more as well. But yeah. not a huge amount there really shocked me. A lot of it I was already kind of aware of. A lot of it, some of it I wasn't. I think it might be just because the UK isn't so different from the US in a lot of things around this, but yeah, nothing hugely surprising there to me. Let me know down below if there's anything that wasn't really covered on here that you think might be a totally kind of surprising thing. I think it might be cool to sort of come back to this at some point and kind of just see. This video was 3 years ago. A lot can happen in 3 years, so things might have changed. I suspect there are some things that haven't been covered here that would shock me. The whole tax thing is really confusing to me. So do let me know what your kind of opinion is of that, and how you travel from like between states and things like that. Yeah, I'm really curious about that whole thing and what you think about it. And same with the date format, how you feel about that as an American, as someone that's used it their whole life. I assume obviously you're used to it, but how do you feel about it? Like if they were to suddenly change it to, you know, the day, month, year format, would that be really annoying? Would you dislike that? Or what? Obviously it'd be confusing at first because you'd have to sort of get out of muscle memory, but yeah, let me know. I'm gonna end it there as this has gone on for 40 minutes. Oh my god. Right, I'm gonna end it there. I hope you enjoyed, and yeah, let me know if there's any other videos you want me to react to, or anything like this I'm really interested in. So yeah, I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.